Yeah, man, how you doing? You good? I know you like that.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome into the Saturday show on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. As you can tell, I'm Michelle Bodkin, the Utah Utes insider for KSLSports.com. Jake Hatch, currently still in Texas, kind of on his way home. He got to enjoy all the glory that was Big 12 Media Day, the first one ever for BYU football. And it looked like it went pretty well. We're actually going to have Jake join us pretty shortly here. But first, I mean, we have to do our traditional stuff. So, you know, my wonderful producer behind the glass today is, of course, Sarah. Sarah, do you have a highlight of your week?
Yeah, it's kind of fun that it's kind of a girls episode.
It is
today,
a girls episode. I like it. I like it.
Yeah, but my highlight is I have family in town.
Okay.
So that's been kind of fun. My dad's here visiting his extended family, and a few of his siblings are in town. And so, yeah, they have like a little reunion planned for today. I went to dinner with him last night, so it's fun.
I love good family time. I actually get to do that next week. I'm going to stay behind after Pac-12 Media Day wraps up because I have some family in Las Vegas. So I'm definitely looking forward to that, and I'm glad that you get to experience that yourself. I as well, I guess, have a highlight of the week. For me, it was we ran our Athletes for Life story on the Sunday News last week, and the feedback I got from some of the tribe members was just so sweet. One of the fathers of the kids was telling me that his kids were so excited. They said that they were going to be famous because they're on TV. And it just is a reminder that I think people want to be seen and appreciated. And I think sometimes when we have people kind of tucked into more of these rural areas, they get forgotten and they kind of feel a little bit left out. So that was really awesome, you know, to hear that they enjoyed the camp experience. They enjoyed the promos and some of the stuff that we wrote about them and showed on TV. And it's just kind of the start of something that I think is going to be really special moving forward.
Yeah, that is so fun. And I'm glad that it was so successful.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. No, there's already plans and talks about how to make it bigger and better and more inclusive next year. And hopefully, you know, KSL will continue to be involved with that because it was a very cool story. You know, I think Jake is on the line and ready to go. Jake, what was your highlight of the week before I start grilling you about Big 12 Media Day?
Honestly, probably just coming down to Big 12 Media Day, honestly, Michelle. It's a ton of fun to be down here in Dallas. It's been really, really hot. Heat index north of 110 every day I've been here, but hey, it's been fun all the same.
Well, I mean, I feel you because that was kind of the Florida game last year.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's most likely going to be Baylor for me here in a little over a month. That's crazy to think about. Okay, so let's jump into it, Jake. You know, what was your overall impression of BYU's first Big 12 Media Days? What was some of the biggest takeaways from that event?
Well, I think the first thing is that I think the Big 12 is very excited to have BYU along with the other four newcomers coming into the conference. That was kind of the big thing from this media days. A lot of people wondered if Brett Yormark was going to come out and make some grandiose statement about conference expansion or something like that. No, and they really just kind of celebrated the new members in the conference, and BYU in particular, to a man and woman that I spoke to down there Big 12 Media Days, they are very, very excited to have the Cougars in the conference. They know that the fans of BYU are absolutely invested, and they're excited to have them as part of all this. But the biggest thing I think is that BYU themselves, so you have Kalani Sitake as well as BYU's players, made a really, really good impression. That first day when BYU spoke, Kalani Sitake was out on Media Row talking to anybody and everybody who wanted to talk to him well past 7 o'clock local time. That was hours after the other programs and players, coaches, et cetera, had left. So I think they made a very, very positive first impression.
Well, that sounds like Kalani. Obviously, I know him fairly well from his time at Utah and still kind of keep in touch here and there now that he's down at BYU. And yeah, that does not surprise me in the slightest that he would be so willing to give his time to everybody. You know, from BYU's perspective, you know, how how do you think, I mean, you kind of touched on the Big 12, how they're perceiving them. Who do you think maybe had the best takeaways about BYU and what BYU brings to the Big 12?
I would say, so the biggest thing about this is I think there were a bunch of people who were looking at the way that the preseason poll worked out. Now, I was talking with a couple of guys, I think they were from Kansas. I apologize if I screwed up where they were from, but they were talking about, they think that BYU could finish top half of the conference this fall. And I kind of looked at them like, I'm not so sure about that, guys. Like they were really, really high on the way that Kalani Sitake has built his program. They think that BYU, with the number of Power 5 opponents they've been able to schedule during their independent era, have them set up for success. And I think that the biggest thing is that they think that BYU can become a competitive program pretty early on in this new era of the Big 12. Now, I think you and I have both talked about this enough, Michelle, that we both think that, you've got to continue to recruit at a high level, but you didn't have the ball, quote-unquote, bounce your way in certain circumstances to have that happen. And we'll see if it ultimately comes to where BYU can be a power player in the Big 12 early on, but it's all really going to depend on some good fortune, but also BYU, they very much need to continue to improve their recruiting on the recruiting trail.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things, it would not shock me if BYU does better than I think people are anticipating, and that even to a certain degree includes myself, because obviously I'm trying to base this realistically off of something that I've already kind of watched happen.
Yes.
But I mean, as you mentioned, there's sometimes luck involved. Whereas everybody else, kind of currently within the conference, maybe it's a low period in the conference, and a team like BYU can kind of take advantage of that and really establish themselves. There's just a lot of things at play. So while I don't think it's impossible, it's just maybe not likely, but that's why we play the game, and that's why I think we're all just kind of excited and curious to see how things play out.
Well, yeah, and that's the biggest thing is there's just an excitement factor where yesterday was 50 days until BYU kicked off. I know that Utah's like 47 days away from today, I think, is when they kick off against Florida. And I think there's an excitement level that the season is on its way. I know from BYU's perspective, Michelle, they have waited for years and decades at this point to live this dream of being in the Power 5. So the bigger thing, I think, overall is that, hey, the season's almost here. Let's get ready for it. Training camp opens up in 2 or 3 weeks' time, and off we go.
You did mention that Kalani, spoke at Big 12 Media Days, really impressed. I remember when Utah was brought on, Kyle Whittingham was very serious about, kind of going back to the last point that we talked about, was very serious about, the kind of undertaking it was. I'm curious what, if anything, maybe Kalani said that alluded to just what BYU is going to have to do in order to kind of hit the ground running in this new conference.
Well, he referenced the fact that he went through that transition process with Utah at least a couple of times that I heard him. He talked about the fact that him, Jay Hill, and Aaron Roderick, his two coordinators, offensive and defensive, both went through that process while they were all at Utah coaching under Coach Witt, as you mentioned. And he talked about the fact that we've been through this, but he also did add the caveat, and something that you and I have both acknowledged, is that the transfer portal has completely changed the whole calculus of this. You can bring in BYU, I think, somebody to count 58 new names on this roster this year for BYU. That includes freshmen, return missionaries, junior college transfers, and transfer portal additions. So mass turnover of roster is absolutely capable of happening. And if you play your cards the right way, that mass roster turnover can yield a deeper and more competitive program. But on the flip side, it also could weaken your program. So
right.
It's going to be very interesting to see how they handle it. But I think BYU, they're quite confident in how they went about building this roster this year, and they're hoping that they did it the right way, honestly.
Keaton Slovis was on hand. What was he kind of saying? What's his feeling? This is obviously his third stop. He's kind of been all over the country actually playing football. What are his thoughts and his feelings of kind of getting to do this new adventure?
Well, he was joking around because Kalani said, "Hey, I asked Keaton Slovis for help with media days. I haven't done one of these in a while because Keaton did one when he was at USC, and Keaton's like, oh, he was just fine. He's a people person." But Keaton, he sounds like he's just ready to get out there on the field. He talked about the fact like we're here talking and it's fun and it's exciting, but I just want to get out there and get back to work with my guys, as he referred to guys like Cody Epps, et cetera, who were also here at media days. And I think he is just ready for all the talking to be done, Michelle, and to finally just get out and play ball, because that's something that he has been just waiting for. Is he wants to go out and prove himself. He knows that last year at Pitt had a lot of people thinking that, okay, he's past his prime, he can't do this. But BYU's coaches believed in him. He was their number one target in the transfer portal quarterback-wise, and they got their guy. And they believe that he can be what they need at quarterback this year. It's going to be all a matter of finally getting out there in training camp beginning in August, and then obviously coming up in September when BYU takes the field officially.
That sounds very similar to Micah Pittman in Utah.
Yes.
That it's you're our guy and we believe in you. We know that things maybe didn't go how you wanted them to, but we think you can come in and be huge for us and we can be huge for you. I'm very curious to see how Keaton does because I think he did show flashes while he was at USC. But the problem is he kind of slumped off for whatever reason, and there's sometimes, there again. We like to try and paint this as very black and white as to why that could be. But usually there's like a lot of different reasons that kind of go into that. And so it's going to be curious to see I think to me, when you have someone believe in you, that helps your situation so much.
Correct, and that's the biggest thing. And Keaton told me this at the end of spring ball, and he alluded to it during media days as well, Michelle, that this will be the first time he has truthfully ever played for the offensive coordinator that he was actually recruited by, both at USC and Pitt. They had offensive coordinators been there when he was recruited and signed with them, but then they ultimately made changes. And he said that it worked out pretty well with Graham Harrell at USC. At Pitt, it did not work out so well. Mark Whipple was the guy he committed to, who ultimately got fired, and Brian Kurt Signetti, who went with more of a run-based offense. He said just it wasn't what I was looking for as a quarterback. Aaron Roderick will be the first coordinator he committed to and will actually play for. And I think that has got him feeling a lot more confident, knowing that, hey, I've got the guy calling plays for me that believes in me, and we'll see what ultimately transpires.
That is a huge difference maker as well. Absolutely. So Cosmo also was getting some attention. I don't think that should shock anyone. Were there any, who else within the mascot range was maybe kind of impressive, amusing, a bit of a showstopper? Was it really kind of Cosmo's show?
Cosmo did a really good job. He did, absolutely. I thought that Hookem, so they have Debo and Hookem for the Texas Longhorn. Debo is obviously the real life Longhorn they have on the sidelines, but Hookem is their costume mascot. He was all over the place having a good time himself. I will say this, Michelle. I don't know what Cincinnati Bearcats, the Bearcat mascot's name is, but they have whoever was donning that mascot costume had to have been 6'8", Michelle. Tallest mascot I have ever seen. Walking by, I'm like, who is that? It was just showstopper in that regard because they were so dang tall. Most mascots are not that tall, but Cosmo made a good impression. Hooker made a good impression. I actually really thought the Nitro, the UCF Knights, he doesn't necessarily have a costume that is as adept to doing crazy things as Cosmo's is, but he was having some fun. And then I don't know if you saw the funny picture, Shasta, which is the Houston Cougars mascot. They did the whole Spider-Man pointing at each other pose with him and Cosmo. It made me chuckle pretty good on that one.
I love some good mascot battles. I've seen a few of them on the sidelines myself. Going back to the football part of it, I love it when you can find crazy cool connections. And to be honest, this is football is one of the biggest, littlest industries ever. Because you play your cards right. At some point, it feels like everybody knows everybody, and you've crossed paths and spent time together. I think Steve Sarkisian, who's the head coach now of Texas, is a very interesting example of that. Obviously, has the connection to BYU, played at BYU, knows some of the coaching staff, knows our very own Hans Olsen. They were teammates. What was it like hearing him kind of talk about BYU getting this opportunity and maybe some of some of his recollections of trying to grow the program when he was a player.
Well, he referenced back to when he was at BYU, and they made that 14-1 run his senior year in '96. And he said that we weren't part of what they called the Bull Alliance at that point. It was the forerunner to the BCS. And he said that we kind of got aced out of playing in one of the true big games. He said that the Cotton Bowl was great. It was a January 1st game. That was fun, but they wanted to play for something bigger than that. And he referenced that in saying that now BYU does have that opportunity in front of them. They can no longer be denied that access now as members of the Big 12. And obviously, Texas will be making the jump to the SEC next year, but he was very complimentary of Kalani, who was a teammate of his as well at BYU, along with Hands, and he's excited. He's excited for BYU to get this opportunity. Now, obviously, that comes with the caveat, Michelle, that when BYU goes to Texas in late October, he wants nothing more than to beat BYU because he's the head coach of Texas at this time. But he has got a lot of complimentary things to say about BYU. He was effusive in his praise of Lavelle Edwards and Norm Chow, who were the kind of the brain trust that helped him while he was at BYU. But he was very excited for his alma mater to have the opportunity to have that door open to them to play for bigger things now. But yes, that tune will change a little bit come October when the Longhorns and the Cougars square off.
No doubt. And, I mean, Texas has reason to be maybe a little chippy towards BYU. BYU's had their number.
Yeah, they're 4-1 all time against Texas, 2-0 versus Oklahoma, the two schools leaving. So BYU, no matter what, when those two schools leave, will have a winning record against them.
If you're a Cougar fan, you can't hate that.
No.
Let's talk about what's ahead for BYU now. Now, Media Day is kind of, I think, the signal caller that, yes, the season's around the corner. Yep. That has now been checked off for BYU. What's kind of next on the docket? What are they really looking at, focusing on as they prepare to make this big transition to a P5 conference?
Well, as I mentioned, they kind of made a good impression in talking season, as Coach Spurrier liked to refer to, obviously, here at Media Days. But their biggest thing now, Michelle, is they want to go out and make an impression on the football field. Mm-hmm. We've talked about this, what will constitute success year one. I still think that if they get to bowl eligibility, 6-6, I think it'd be a good debut for BYU. And they talk like they want to do more than that, and that's great. But I think in their heart of hearts, I think if they were to make it to a bowl game, they'd be feeling pretty good about their first year in the Big 12. And they obviously have to go out and show what they're capable of. They've still got to work on, obviously, getting that defense up to snuff. We all know that Jay Hill is a very, very good defensive coach, but he's only had 15 practices so far to implement his vision and what he's going with. So he's got the next 29 practices during training camp to go out and really get things ingrained with these guys, and hopefully they can hit the ground running. I think they should be 2-0 after the first 2 weeks when they play Sam Houston and Southern Utah, but then it's really on. 10 straight weeks of Power 5 opposition. It's going to test the depths of BYU like it's never been tested before, and we've seen them falter under some of these seasons where they've had 5, 6, 7 Power 5 opponents in independence. So what is 10 weeks of that going to look like? We're all about to find out.
Did anyone from BYU kind of divulge where they felt like the defense currently sat at? I think that is actually a very good question and point that you brought up, that Jay Hill has only had a handful of practices, and he's going to get maybe 2 handfuls more before it's time to put it out on the field.
Well, and so talking with Ben Bywater, obviously linebacker for BYU, he feels like this defense has been in a way simplified for them. There's no longer week to week. We're changing the whole philosophy and the scheme, which it seemed like at times they were doing the last 2 seasons. He said that the whole idea is we have what we do with our base, and obviously there's adjustments week to week depending on opponent. But he said that Coach Hill has come in and really just kind of implemented, this is our base philosophy, guys. And you know this, Michelle. It comes from the Kyle Whittingham tree. It goes up the tree to Fred Whittingham, obviously. It's a very simplistic defense that has the ability to adapt as circumstances need, but there's a clear identity. And that's the one thing that I think that Ben is very appreciative of, is that there's just that identity has been established in spring ball. Obviously, they'll continue to make sure that groundwork is really ingrained in these guys coming up in training camp. But I think that they're just appreciative of the fact, okay, we have a base philosophy here, and we all know exactly what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, no, that definitely screams Utah football. There is absolutely the base defense, and then things just kind of branch off from there. And a lot of it depends on how comfortable everybody is, how experienced everybody is. Some years the defense is maybe a little more complex than other years, but there's always kind of that that fallback that you go to. And I think that's a great thing to get established, especially, again, when you're upping the competition. And I think mistakes are a little bit easier to come by just simply because you're facing tougher competition week in and week out.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing is they know what they're up against in terms of just the overall depth and breadth of these programs. And I think to any one of the 4 new programs, they'll kind of spoke to that, like, hey, we've done our best, absolutely, to try and build up our roster, but I think they're under no illusions that it's going to take them probably some time to truthfully get to Power 5 caliber type rosters, where your 2s and 3s, there's not as significant a drop-off as it might be when you're in the G5 or in BYU's case, an independent program. So it's going to be interesting. I'm excited to see what BYU's work, how it pays off this year, and see where ultimately they land. But there are people saying that I was too low on BYU because I picked them 10th in my preseason poll when I voted for it with the Big 12. But I think that's almost a perfect spot for BYU where they can feel slighted, but at the same time, they can play Spoilermaker and go out there and make some noise.
Absolutely. And I mean, that I think that's kind of what Utah started out as, when they made that jump. It wasn't necessarily that they were always in it per se, but but they were the team that would play you tough and come in and possibly wreck and ruin your season. And I think, I think that's a good mindset, a good place for BYU to be in, as they start this adventure. And obviously that can grow and curtail into, something a little bit more, as we've kind of seen with, Utah's adventure, moving up the ranks in the P5. Now, Jake, I know that you stayed behind and actually you covered another media day. Talk about that experience.
Well, it was kind of on accident. I'm not going to lie. I didn't know what was happening. But the United Athletic Conference, which is now the combination of the WAC, which has Southern Utah and Utah Tech in it, along with the ASUN, they have created a new – it's going to be 9 teams this year, but when UT Rio Grande Valley finally starts their program in 25, it would be 10 teams. They had their media day just a stone's throw away from AT&T Stadium yesterday at what they call Texas Live. It's a big kind of area where there's a bunch of bars and restaurants. So I wandered over yesterday morning, had a chance to catch up with Utah Tech and Southern Utah coaches and players, and I'm interested to see how they do because Delane Fitzgerald, obviously the coach of Southern Utah, he is in his second year, and he came in and we talked about flipping BYU's roster, Michelle. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that anybody's flipped their roster more than Southern Utah. I would say that in the last 2 off seasons, he may have flipped like 80% of that roster at SUU. Like he has really done a number on changing things down there. And then for Utah Tech, Paul Peterson, he's in year 5. It's crazy to think he's been there that long, but he was the first coach as they made the transition to Division I. And get this, Michelle, they have gone in 5 years from being an FCS independent to being a member of the WAC, and now a member of what they call in the UAC, the United Athletic Conference. And I think both of them feel fairly confident they can go out and compete this year.
That's awesome. What a happy accident, Jake.
I know. Well, yeah. Well, I got an email from Utah Tech saying, hey, we're having media day tomorrow. I'm like, well, that just so happens I have an open morning. I'll wander on over and say hi to you guys. So.
Okay, before I let you go, Jake, best thing you've eaten.
Okay, if you come down to Dallas, Michelle, or anybody out there listening to us, there's a place called Hurtado Barbecue, Hurtado. They are in Texas Monthly's top 50 barbecue restaurants in the state of Texas, so they've got the recognition of this. But that was absolutely incredible barbecue. I went out to eat with Matt Biamonte, Mitch Harper, Alex Curie. Who else was with us? Also Kyle Ireland is with us as well. All the guys from KSL. We saw Jeremiah Jensen over there as well. It was absolutely incredible. It's kind of a Texas barbecue, so it's got the brisket and everything, the ribs, all that stuff. That's still very much traditional in that way, but with kind of a unique Tex-Mex, spin on it. And it was absolutely incredible. I actually went to the Texas Rangers game last night, Michelle, and they actually have a Hurtado barbecue stand inside the stadium. Guess who wandered over and got more brisket last night? This guy.
You went back for seconds. It was that good.
Yes, it was.
Well, that is great information to know. I don't know when I will ever be in that area, but if I happen to, Hurtado's is the spot.
Yeah, make it happen. There's no doubt about it. It was absolutely incredible.
Okay, well, Jake, I appreciate you jumping on. Safe travels back to Salt Lake, and I will not see you next week. We will actually be doing the reverse of what we're doing here today.
Well, we're just going to call and harass you and have you weigh in on Pac-12 Media Day, but it'll be fun all the same.
Totally. No, I'm excited about that. But anyway, get back here safe, and we'll chat soon.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. Talk to you soon.
All right, everybody. That is my co-host, Jake Hatch, with the whole rundown on Big 12 Media Day. We have a lot more to cover as far as BYU and their Big 12 Media Days. Up next, we will have an interview with Tom Holmoe from our very own Jake Hatch that just got off the phone with us. You are listening to The Saturday Show on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Welcome back into the Saturday Show. I am Michelle Bodkin, your host today. Jake Hatch is currently on his way home from Texas from Big 12 Media Day, and that's kind of the theme of the show. Behind the glass, as always, Sarah keeping me on track. It's the all-girl show. In fact, Clint, our good friend Clint on Twitter, said it's the rural girl show, and I'm not really sure why.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, I live north of Tampa technically, so I guess it's a little more. Is
that more rural?
Yeah, I mean a little bit, but I don't know how he would know that. So, but hey, it is an all-girl show all the same.
Definitely, he did get the all-girl show part right. Really great stuff in the last segment from Jake, who again was there, experienced the whole big to do, bringing in 4 new schools for the Big 12, BYU being one of them. This is the first year that the Cougars, of course, are hitting the ground as a P5 member. So lots of good stuff to get to, and that brings us to our next interview that we're going to play for you. Jake Hatch sat down with Tom Holmoe and interviewed him about what it means for BYU to be in the Big 12.
Here with Tom Holmoe, and Tom, Media Day's here. Does it feel real that, hey, we're on our way to the Big 12 officially?
Yeah, it's real. If anybody doesn't think so, to step in this venue and you know it's on.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any question that, man, it's Cowboy Stadium. And I'm a Niner, but I'm impressed by how the Jones family and the Cowboys have opened this up.
Yeah.
Come into our backyard or our living room for the Big 12. Great.
Now, obviously, you've shepherded BYU from the Mountain West to independence and now ushering them into the Big 12 era. Can you talk a little bit to just how much work you've had to do in all those?
I don't really look at it as, oh, my gosh, I'm exhausted. I think that by nature of being the athletic director at BYU, and the 3 or 4 previous ADs before me, they've all been in the same business. We're trying to get into a P5, and they chipped away. And I think that when I inherited this job, which was passed on from them, that was one of the responsibilities is, try. And I had a little bit of a head start because those guys had given me that head start. I've said so many times that 40 years, Lavelle, and you can go back to Christian McCosix and Stan Watts and this great, incredible brand of BYU athletics. But Lavelle really is the one. And so I look back, and if someone's going to say, hey, Tom, people say thanks for helping, this is great. I say, thank you, it's just great to be part of it. I play a role in it like Jimmer played a role in it. Danny Ainge played a role in it. Kenneth Rooks played a role. Well, we were already in.
But still,
if you could go through any of them. And it's just like we've all been fighting for this for a long time, and this is the right time. The planets and stars aligned, and I'm happy.
Now, obviously, I had a chance to talk with Rondo Fehlberg recently, and he talked about that. He's like, we've been kind of building towards this for 30, he said 30 years, obviously, because he did in the late 90s and everything, but he's talked about, he's like, this is kind of the fulfillment of years and decades-long work. Do you have that same sentiment?
Yeah. I mean, at our celebration, we had a dinner for our department employees, and I invited Val and Rondo because I know those two guys, and we would have brought Coach Tuckett if he hadn't passed. Yeah. But I know those guys, and I know the efforts that they made, so I didn't want to discount the fact that their contributions, and when they celebrated it just as hard as I did, so I know how much it felt for them to be part of it, and they are a big part of it.
Now, we talked with you during that celebration, and you said that football is the driver of all of this, obviously, and this is Big 12 Football Media Day. What do you think Kalani Sitake has done the best in preparing for this upcoming season?
The culture of the team. Kalani's strength is he's a people person, and he just is able to get players to perform. And you've looked at when he came in and inherited the team, it's changed. There's been some highs and there's been some lows, but the last couple of years, especially the last two, we've been able to do some things with some infusion of money, where he had to make some really important decisions on personnel and who we can add and what kind of people we need in what areas. There's a few jobs that were new, but it wasn't so much about the job as much as about the person fulfilling that job. I think that's his strength. But he also is, he's a fan, and he talks about being a BYU fan before he's a BYU player. So I think he relates so well to every fan and Big Cougar Nation, and I think they relate really well to him. So when you are trying to build a brand, which we've been trying to build for 40 years, he's great for the brand, and I love that part of it. Those are some of the top, but he's got a lot of skills and talents that lend so much to BYU.
He's assembled a really good staff, and two of his guys in particular, Aaron Roderick as well as Jay Hill, who are his coordinators, went with him. We were at Utah all together when they went through the transition from the Mountain West to the Pac-12. Has that been a help to have those guys have had that experience making that transition at all?
Yeah, I think that Kalani and the previous staff had some wins. They had some good successes, but I think that he had to make some hard decisions about moving forward under different circumstances. This is a whole new ball game, going from independence to Big 12. The schedule's different. The brands and the programs are stronger. We played some really good big-time teams in independence, but we also had some softer teams on the schedule. So he realized that this team had to kind of rebuild, not from the bottom up. There's a great foundation by Lavelle and Gary and Bronco and Kalani where we're ready for this. Make no mistake about it, we're ready, but it's going to be different. And we're going to have to make transitions. And we studied University of Utah when they made that change to the Pac-12. We were able to look at that and see some of the things that they did right and some of the things they would have done differently. But they made that transition effectively well in a short amount of time.
Now, this might sound facetious, but how much simpler is your life not having to schedule 12 games every year?
I think it's the question of the year. Everybody asks me, and I don't really even think about it once.
Okay.
I just think that was the task. When we went independent, that was going to be the thing. So, up in my to-do list every day was schedule, and it's not on my to-do list anymore. So there's other things that have taken its place. So it's not like I'm on a little fiesta right now. It's more like what's at the top of mind right now is different than it was, during scheduling or COVID or whatever it might be.
Well, I also wanted to ask you, in terms of kind of next steps for you guys, what's on your docket here?
Well, I think certainly the transition is important. You don't want to run too fast. We've made a lot of strategic decisions, and now we have to monitor them because I'm under the belief that we're going to have to change some of those directions, and we will not get everything right. in that what we've prepared for. So I think that we're walking before we run.
Yeah.
We've made great preparation. We've spent a lot of great effort and energy in our preparations, but monitoring that and seeing what's right and keep going, double down, and then turn, make a U-turn, and take another road on what we may have missed on.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you in terms of there's going to be some feeling out process here, it feels like, for you guys. Like, as you said, sometimes you may try something, it doesn't work, you go back to the drawing board. Is that kind of the mentality as you guys get ready to fully make the transition?
Certainly. But I don't think that we've had to put all our eggs in one risky business.
Yeah.
It's not my style, it's not our culture of our athletic department to take dramatic risks. But we have strategies that we all confer on. Kalani and I, being together now for this long amount of time, every year it's a little bit more firmer and firmer on I knowing how he thinks, and he knows how I think. So I think our work and efforts in the years past, kind of up and down and changes and stuff, are just built for today and the future.
Speaking of the other sports, basketball, on the Olympic sports, is there going to be certain sports you feel like will have a tougher transition than others? Or do you think it'll feel like it's across the board, everybody's going to have their work cut out for them?
Well, I think everyone will have to change and adapt, to make no mistake about it. Yeah. But I think by nature of just the overall strength of some Big 12 sponsored sports, like basketball. Yeah. I mean, it's the best conference in the country, and that'll be a challenge for Coach Pope and his staff, but I feel like we're going to be competitive.
Okay.
But I think that if you look at some of the other sports, it depends on how the Big 12 is at this time. Some of our teams are really, really good, and it might take them a while to get a championship, as opposed to some that are going to transition, and it might not look good right away, but being in the Big 12 is going to help with recruiting, exposure, access, all those things that are important to our future.
Last thing for me, how exciting is this for you personally to be here and celebrating the Big 12?
I'm super excited because, like, being here today, I represent Cougar Nation. Yeah. So does Kalani, so do our 5 players, so does Cosmo and the cheerleaders. If you're here representing BYU, if you're here on behalf of BYU, you represent everybody. And what I'm trying to tell everybody today is we're trying to be a great partner in the Big 12. And we just don't want to come in and go, okay, now we're going to go do our thing. BYU is a strange school. We're going to be a great partner, and we're going to do everything we can to make the Big 12 stronger. And that's our focus of attention. We'll focus on our teams, but we have to make sure that everybody grows together if we want to be the best conference in America.
Well, Tom, cannot thank you enough for taking some time, and best of luck moving forward.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, guys, that was our very own Jake Hatch with BYU's athletic director Tom Homo talking about the transition to the Big 12 for the BYU Cougars. Some really interesting things there. One, talking about the process to get to the Big 12, very much like Utah, and I know this for a fact. This has been a 30, 40-year deal in the making for BYU to try and get into the Big Kids Club. Very much a similar tale for Utah. And in fact, I think both sides, if you're interested, my former boss over at Ute Zone, Dan Sorensen, did a really great piece, I think, at the 10-year mark of Utah being in the Pac-12. And he talked to Chris Hill, I think Kyle Whittingham, Spence Eccles, and at the time Larry Scott about kind of what happened and how this all kind of came together. It's a long piece. It's like a two-part piece. But regardless of who you cheer for, I think it just gives a good insight into what it has taken probably, and it'll be interesting because I think BYU, someone will do their own version for BYU and really kind of go into depth and talk to the key playmakers in that move for BYU. But I think it gives you a pretty good idea as to what it takes to get a small school into a bigger conference. And it's a lot of moving pieces that goes into it, and a lot of vision for what the future could be. This isn't just I woke up this morning and decided I wanted to go to law school type of deal. This takes a lot of planning and foresight and just kind of chipping away at it year by year. And there are a lot of people involved. Tom Holmoe mentioned, the work that, guys like Jimmer Fredette and Lavelle Edwards put into, making and just helping to build the brand to where it was desirable enough that someone would want to take a chance on it. So really cool, good stuff. I don't know if, Sarah, you have anything you want to add to that.
I just thought I liked how realistic he was about the whole situation, because I feel like fans and even players and coaches can get caught up in the excitement of a new conference, but not just in this interview, but in other interviews I've heard, he's like very aware that it's going to be a hard road for a lot of the teams, and it might take them a while for them to, have great success in the conference. And I think that's something BYU fans also need to keep in mind, because as a BYU alum, I've seen there's a lot of very aggressive fans that have their blue goggles on, as they say. So just keeping in mind, like, it's gonna be a learning curve for sure, and it might take a few more than just a season or two to get to where they want to be. And you just got to be along for the ride, because that's what diehard fans do, because BYU fans can be very quick to judge and very quick to get frustrated. So I think that's my big takeaway, is just remember, it's exciting, but it's also going to be a tough time.
And I'm glad that you brought up that piece as well, because that was the other piece that stood out to me. Is I think, again, very much BYU, Tom Holmoe, Kalani Sitake, they're all taking from Utah's experience. And that is the nice thing for BYU. They do have a bit of a blueprint. Now, some things are different. There's different things that both schools have to kind of face and try and navigate and figure out in order to be good at what they're in their respective conferences. And their respective conferences are very different in a lot of ways. But there are also some things, and I think the one thing that he said that I thought was very smart and very calculated is we kind of have these paths and these roads that we know we want to go down, but we're also prepared to make a U-turn and go the other way if we need to. And we kind of know that it's going to be a little bit of trial and error as we go along, and we may think we have a good plan and find out as we start trying to execute it, it really doesn't work that well, and that we might have to recalculate and go a different direction. And I think that's very important when you are trying to navigate kind of unknown waters, is having that flexibility and not going into it feeling like you have all the answers.
For sure. Yeah. I think, he's made he's very good about and very articulate about the way he talks, because he's not going to just hate on BYU, obviously, but, he's aware that it's going to be a process and a learning curve for sure.
Absolutely. And one that I am excited to watch from afar, because it was sure fun watching Utah do it. So I'm all here for round 2. Let's see how round 2 goes with a different local Utah school. We are going to head to a break. On the other side, a fan favorite, technical fouls. Sarah and I will delve out some awards for bad behavior. You are listening to The Saturday Show on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
If you're coming from the street with dirty shoes on your feet, that's a technical foul. If you switch the radio to some modern music show, that's a technical foul. If you touch the thermostat,
you'll get hit with a bat.
'Cause that's a technical foul.
You will feel my wrath.
That's a technical foul.
Personal foul, 69, offense. He was giving them the business.
A technical foul.
Okay, you heard it. It's technical foul time today on The Saturday Show on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Up first, Sarah, let's hear what you got for us.
All right. So I don't know if everyone's aware, but the ESPYs happened, the big award show that happens with all the athletes. And LeBron James, of course, made an appearance. And in his speech, he kind of talked, I guess earlier in the year, he alluded that he might be retiring right after, they lost the finals. And yeah, it's very interesting. So I'm just going to play it really quick and then we can react after.
I don't care how many more points I score or what I can or cannot do on the floor. The real question for me is, can I play without cheating this game? The day I can't give the game everything on the floor is the day I'll be done. Lucky for you guys, that day is not today.
So, lucky for us, I'm sorry. I'm like, my life is going to end unless I know that he's not retiring. I don't know. Maybe for some people that might be a huge deal, but like, you could be a little more humble about it. Like, he kind of contradicted himself because he was like talking about how the game is more important, but then immediately says, well, lucky for you guys, I'm not leaving the game, I don't know.
Well, lucky for you, LeBron, I don't really care because I don't watch NBA basketball. So, but yeah, I mean, to your point, maybe, well, no, not maybe. I know that was a really important announcement for some people that live, eat, and breathe NBA basketball. That just does not happen to be me.
Yeah, especially LeBron, because some people aren't fans of teams; they're just fans of LeBron, and
right, or specific players. Yeah,
they'll just go wherever he goes.
So to all those brawny fans out there, like, I guess it was a good day at the ESPYs.
It's very true. I was just like, you just didn't have to say it that way. Come on.
He had some nice rhyming in that little speech. Score, floor again.
Yeah. It was calculated for sure. He knew exactly what he was doing.
But I was
like, oh man, you really had to throw that in there. Lucky for you guys.
Well, I think it's the attitude that probably makes him great. Maybe a little unbearable on a personal level at times, but it certainly works out on the floor. So I guess we get another year of LeBron James. I am going to switch gears and take a look at college football. It just recently came down the other day. I think actually, yes, Friday. It was Friday. Friday in the AM, actually. The NCAA fined Tennessee more than $8 million on Friday and issued a scathing report outlining more than 200 infractions during the 3-year tenure of former football coach Jeremy Pruitt. The Volunteers did escape, however, a postseason ban. Now, this report sprawled over 80 pages long and said that Tennessee committed 18 Level 1 violations, which are the most severe, and said that most involved recruiting infractions and direct payments to athletes and their families, benefits that totaled approximately $60,000. Now, to me, I look at that and I'm like, $60,000, like, that's kind of a drop in the bucket compared to like what we're dealing with now with NIL. And, Jeremy Pruitt, you were just ahead of your time, babe. Like, just wait like a couple more years and you could have freely been doing this and it would not have been an $8 million fine for your team and you being fired, of course. I don't know. I just, when the NCAA chooses to exert its power is fascinating to me. This makes me wonder if it's kind of dropped out of the headlines, but all the stuff with ASU and some of the things that they were doing during COVID with Herm Edwards, it makes me wonder if they'll eventually pick this back up, because this kind of fell out of the headlines too. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, we're talking about Jeremy Pruitt again.
Yeah, the timing is so weird. So, like, why now? Now that you have NIL,
right,
like you said, why do we need to get into this now?
I don't know. To me, I'm like, I mean, definitely check yourself, Tennessee. Like, but
oh, for sure. But still,
you hate seeing, I guess, institutional irresponsibility, which it sounds like that was also a big part of the issue. But I don't know. I'm just like, Does it really matter at this point? Like, you're punishing them for something that's totally legal now. I don't know. And you know what? I feel like before we go to break, we also need to give like a special, like, honorable mention to Northwestern. Whew. What a bad week to be a Northwestern fan. Your football
Very
coach
true.
and your baseball coach. Yikes.
Yeah.
Yikes. Well.
Also, I don't know if you've seen, but Georgia is under fire too.
Georgia has some issues as well.
Come on, guys, get your act together.
I just, here's the thing. This is like a really hard job because there is a lot that you have to keep track of. But I've always said, and I've always felt like I don't know is not a good excuse. And I knew, and I just didn't do anything about it. Also not a good excuse. Like, when you have stuff like this coming up as a head coach and as an entire staff or an entire athletic department, I just don't really have a whole lot of sympathy for you, because what it means is there's corner cutting somewhere. And when you're in charge of something that large, like, you have to be aware. You have to.
Yeah.
You may not personally know, but you need to have eyes and ears out there that are letting you know as things come up so it gets addressed.
100%.
So when stuff is let go for so long, that just doesn't work for me. Okay. I guess we'll wrap this up because, you know what? We have happier things to get to, like more BYU to the Big 12. You have been listening to The Saturday Show on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. On the other side, more Big 12 Media Day.